Morning, everyone. We are on Kuf Dalet Amud Beis. We are learning the Nishmas Mendel Mari Maskam Ruvain. I'm a little excited about where we're learning today. We're learning in Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, the Yeshiva of Meir Shapiro, the individual who started Daf Yomi. He didn't start Amud Yomi, but he certainly gets the credit for Amud Yomi and all of the Yomis that took off and really swept up the Jewish people. So we are here. This is his Beis Medrash. In the background, his yeshiva, and right now it is a place where Jews are able to come and learn and daven, and the dorms are actually reconverted to become a hotel, not the nicest hotel, but a hotel. And so here we go. So we're going to learn an Amud in his Beis Medrash, which is really special. Okay, so here we go. So the Mishnah is on the top of Kuf Dalet Amud Beis. So a person who writes two letters in one lapse of awareness is going to be chayav achatas. Kasa b'diot b'sam. So now we're talking about sofine. So the first thing we need to know is that two letters is what makes a person liable. We'll see a couple of exceptions where writing one letter will make a person chayav, but we'll see that in the Gemara. Then the Gemara talks about the different types of inks that will make a person chayav. Kasa b'diot b'sam b'stikra b'komos v'kan kantom. A person writes with ink, with paint, with red pigment, with gum, or with copper sulfate. U'v'chol davar shiroshim. Bottom line is anything else that marks. Al shnei kosle. Okay, so anytime you do that, you're going to be chayiv. Al shnei kosle zavios. If you write on two corners, let's say you write on one corner over here, and then the next corner, but the point is that you're able to read it seamlessly. Al shnei levache pinkas, or two tablets of a ledger. So you have a ledger, basically a book, and you write on two sides of it, one on this side, one on that side, so you're able to read it smoothly, seamlessly from one to the other. Ve'negin zemzeh, they can be read together. Chayiv, you're going to be chayiv. Hakosav al basaro, chayiv. Person who writes on his flesh is going to be chayiv. Okay, masarat al basaro, a person who scratches letters on his flesh. Okay, scratches in, basically you're cutting into your flesh to write letters. And then Rabbi Eliezer mechayiv chatos v'cham. Rabbi Eliezer holds your chayiv chatos. The cham disagree. We'll see what the machlokas is all about in the Gemara. Kasab mashkan, person writes with liquids. B'mei peros, with fruit juices. Ba'avak derachim, with dust of the roads. Ba'avak hasofer, with scribes dust. V'chol davar shemiskayim pater, or anything that does not last, you're going to be exempt. This writing has to be writing shel kayama. Now that doesn't mean there's not a rabbinic prohibition against writing with something that does not last. So for example, writing in letters, if you have your window fogs over and you want to write your name in it, that's actually something that is prohibited to do on Shabbos. Although you will not be chayav achatas, it is still prohibited to do on Shabbos. La'achar yad, if a person writes the back of their hand, baragl b'fiv uvmar piko, with one's foot, with mouth, or with one's elbow, kasav oso, that's obviously writing in an abnormal fashion, you're going to be passer. Kasav os acha samach liksav, person writes one letter alongside a previously written letter, so meaning you have letter shin, and then you write the mem next to it, so now it says shin, now it spells a letter, b'kasav agabe ksav, or a person writes over existing scripts. Let's say you have writing, and a person writes on top of that writing, a person intends to write a ches. Ches in the Torah, in Ksav Ashuris, is really two zayins with a little hat between them, connecting them. So a person intends to write one letter, a ches, and they end up forgetting that little thing, and they end up writing two zayins. Okay, and that's one example. We're going to see what the halach is for all these cases. A person writes one letter on the ground and one letter on a beam. A person writes on two separate walls of the house, one on that side and one on that side. Okay, al shnei dape pinkas, two columns of a ledger. Now a ledger, again, earlier we had an example where you're writing on two sides and they read together. Over here you're writing, let's say you have over here and over here, so therefore they do not read together. They negim zemzeh, therefore they can't be read together. Pater, in all these cases you are going to be pater. Kosev os achas notarikon, if a person writes one letter as an abbreviation, sometimes one letter represents an entire word. So what's the halacha there? Mishuva Mesera Mechayev. The Mishuva Mesera says you chayev. At the end of the day, you wrote a word, even though it's one letter. Bottom line is it symbolizes an actual word. The Chachamim say you are exempt. Says the Gemara, diosa. Okay, so what is ink? Ink refers to blacking. Sama. Paint refers to orpiment, which is yellow arsenic. Sikra, which is red pigment. Amar Rabba Barchana, Sikarta Shema. Its name is Sikarta. That was his colloquial name. Komos, koma. Gom refers to gum Arabic. Hankantom, copper sulfate. Amar Rabba Barchana, Rishmuel, Charsa. It refers to shoemaker's blackening, okay, like basically shoe polish that they use, that's what it refers to. And anything that marks. Now, whenever the Mishnah gives a couple of examples, it says, and anything like a broad, all-encompassing term, it's coming to include something else. Ask more, let's do including what? Let's do Hadatani Rav Chananya, Tarya. If a person writes a divorce document, which also has a necessity to write something with something that lasts, kasher, efza, or with walnut juice, those are two substances which last. Kasher, it is valid. Tani Rav Chia, a person writes a divorce document with lead, b'shachar, b'shicha, or with charcoal, or with shoemaker's blackening. Kasher, it is kasher. Again, those are all substances which last. Hamisar, a person who scratches letters on their flesh. Rabbi Eliezer holds your chayiv. The chum say, scratching on your flesh, you are pater. Tanya, we have a brayso. Rabbi Eliezer the chum. Rabbi Eliezer says the chum below ben starda hotzik shafim mitzrayim b'srika shavasaro. Ben tzedata wanted to take out the magical spells, the sorcery spells from Mitzrayim. So the problem was that people would inspect you as you left left Mitzrayim to make sure you weren't smuggling things out. What was the currency of Mitzrayim? The currency of Mitzrayim was sorcery spells, and therefore they would check you to make sure nothing was written on a piece of paper. So what did he do? Is smart. He scratched into his flesh to write these different spells, and therefore you see scratching on your flesh is a legitimate way of writing. Amar lo, they said to him, Shotahaya. He was a shota. He was a fool. We don't bring a proof from a deranged person. Okay, says the Mishnah. A person writes one letter next to a previously written script. So let's say there's a shin, and I go ahead and write a mem on Shabbos. The Mishnah says you are going to be pater. Mantana, who's the author of this Mishnah? Amar Rabba Rav Huna de lo Rabbi Eliezer. This is not like Rabbi Eliezer. Di Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, Ha'amar achas ala arig chayav. Rabbi Eliezer said, if you come into Shabbos and there is a piece of clothing that has one weave and you add a second weave, even though you didn't do both weaves, but since together they make up two weaves, you're going to be chayav. Similarly, Rabbi Eliezer would hold that if you add one letter to a previously existing letter, you are going to be chayav. Okay, the Mishnah also said, Kasav Agabi Ksav, if a person writes over existing script, you are going to be exempt. Mantana, who is the author of this Mishnah, of that halacha? Amar Rav Chisda de lo Rabbi Yehuda. This is not like Rabbi Yehuda, of it meaning Rabbi Yehuda holds you would be chayav in such a case, and we'll prove that. Why? The tiny of a brisa. Harishay Tzarech Lichtav Es Hashem. Person needs to write Hashem's name. The letters Yud Hey and Vav Hey. Miniskav Lichtav Yehuda. But the person got confused. They thought they were writing the name Yehuda. Okay, but it gets even worse. Vitavlo Hitel Bodalis. And then they go ahead and they write Yud Hey, and they forgot to write the Dalet. In other words, they're planning on writing Yehuda. They forget to write the Dalet, so they end up writing Yud Hey and Vav Hey, what they had to write, but they didn't have the right intention. In order to be able to be considered a Shem Hashem in a Sefer Torah, you have to have proper intention. So what do you do? Maver Lav Komos Mekacho. Div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says what you're allowed to do is, since the letters Yud Hey and Vav Hey are there, if you just write on top of it, that's enough to infuse those letters with kedusha, and it's considered a proper ksiva of writing God's name. The Chachamim Omrim Ein Hashem and the name of Hashem is not preferred. In other words, this is not considered a legitimate writing, and therefore you are not going to be. That's not a legitimate writing. You have to go ahead, and rewrite the letter. Rewrite the letters. That writing of Yud Hey and Vav Hey does not count. So what do you see? You see, Rabbi Yehuda holds that writing on top of writing is considered a legitimate writing, and therefore our Mishnah, which said writing on top of writing, you are pater, does not go like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that is considered a legitimate writing. Tana, right? So because of as achas l'shlim sefer, a person writes one letter, and in doing so writes the final letter of a book. Right? So you have this 500-page novel, and a person writes the one letter, but it's the final letter in this book. So now the book is complete. Or a person weaves one thread, and in doing so completes the beged chayiv, and there you are going to be chayiv. Mantana, who is the author of this Mishnah, of this brisa, Amar Rav Huna, Rabbi Eliezer, it is Rabbi Eliezer. Achas ala arik chayiv. So you say, it's Rabbi Eliezer, like we saw earlier, who said that adding to something which previously existed, you are going to be chayiv. Rav Ashi Amar, no. Afil Jem Rabbanan. You don't have to say this, Rabbi Eliezer. Here you could say it even is the Rabbanan. Why lahashlam shani, to finish something that is really significant. In other words, when did Rabbi Eliezer say you add to something that's pre-existing and you're chayiv, and the Chacham disagree? That's when it's just the letter shin, and you're adding letter mem. There, Chacham say that's not enough to be considered writing. You have to write two letters. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says no, one letter is enough because you completed a word. But when you're completing a book, that's a big deal. Therefore, the Chachamim, says Rav Ashi, would even agree over here. Amar Rav Ami, a person writes one letter in Tiveria and another in Tzipori, two separate locations, two different cities. Chayav. Rav Ami says you're going to be chayav. Why? It's complete writing. It's just that they're not close together. Ask the Gemara about that. We learned to the Mishnah. A person writes on two walls of a house, or on two different columns of a ledger, can't be read together. Pater, you're going to be pater. So which one is it? Is it that they have to be read together, or they don't have to be read together? So the Gemara says, in the Mishnah, an action is lacking to bring the letters together. There's no action lacking to bring the letters together. What does that mean? What that means is when you're writing on two sides, let's say these are two pieces of paper, two ledgers, and you write over here and over here. So the only way to get them together is you start cutting out these, the parts of the paper. Now I can read them together. But when it comes to writing one in this city and one in that city, if you're writing on two pieces of paper, let's say, two pieces of paper, that all you have to do is put those two pieces of paper together. It happens to be one's in this location, one's in that location. But the point is that there's no action other than just placing them together, as opposed to when it's on two sides of the ledger or it's on two walls. What you have to do is actually do construction or cutting. That already is too much there's too much missing, and therefore you're going to be pater in that case. Tana, it was taught in a brisa. Higia osachas, person corrects one letter, chayiv, you're going to be chayiv. Hashta kasav osachas pater. Now, what's going on? How could it be if you correct one letter, you're going to be chayiv? If someone wrote one letter, you're going to be hashta kasav osachas pater. If you write one letter, you're going to be exempt. Higia osachas chayiv. If you're going to correct one letter, you're going to be chayiv. How does that make any sense? Rav Sheshes hachmai skin. What are we dealing with? We're talking a case where a person wrote a ches. Now again, what we saw earlier was the ches is made up of two zayins. So if you remove the roof of the ches, you just wrote two letters. So you fixed the ches, making it into letters. And you made it into zayins. Rav Omer, another example, a case where you took away the crown of a dalid and you made it into a resh. So why are you going to be chayiv? At the end of the day, you still only wrote one letter. So Rashi explains, we're talking about a case, there's an isser, there's a prohibition against leaving svarim in your house which are mistaken. It's critical that we have svarim which are not mistaken. And therefore, if you leave a sefer in your house which has a mistake in it, it's a prohibition, it's an isser. And therefore, if you fix it, it's just like finishing a book. It's basically you've done something substantial, and therefore you're going to be chayiv. That's Rava's chiddush that says even if it was one letter, but since it does something of substance, does something so incredibly substantial, it makes your sefer from something which is forbidden to keep in your house to something which you're allowed to keep in your house. Therefore, you're going to be chayiv. Tana, we learned in the brisa. Niskav lift of osach. This person intends to write one letter of alu biyado shtayim, and he ended up with two letters. For example, a person plans on writing ches, and instead they forget the little thing on the top. They end up writing two zayins. Chayiv, you're going to be chayiv. Atanan pater. We learned in the Mishnah that a person intends to write one letter, and they end up writing two letters. You're pater. Which one is it? Are you chayiv? Are you pater? When you intend to write one and you end up two, says the Gemara, lo kasha, no contradiction. Hadabet bai ziyune. The Mishnah refers to a case where letters still needed to be crowned. Okay, had lo bai ziyune. The ruling of the brisa refers to a case where they were already crowned. So when the Mishnah said, when the brisa says that you intend to write one, you end up writing two. That's where even though you intended to write one, but your zayins, the zayins which would have made up a ches, they already had crowns. Therefore, they're two legitimate zayins. Whereas in the Mishnah, where it said your pater, that's a case where yes, it's true you wrote two zayins, but they're two incomplete zayins because each zayin in the Torah, if you'll notice, it has three little crowns. It has a big one, two small ones, and therefore, granted, you wrote two letters, but they're not two complete letters, and that's where you're pater. If you write two complete letters, even though you intended to write one letter, you are going to be chayiv. Have a wonderful day.